All right, welcome back. Thank you guys for joining us. We're a little light, but we're going to hopefully some more people will trickle in. And if not, we'll adjust our groups and our teams. A few updates. We did complete the first SAP survey. Kayla and I are working on identifying groups that were not heavily represented and then reopening it. And we're going to be specifically going out to groups that were not heavily represented on it. So we have some PAC meetings. We have some meetings in the Clarkston cluster coming up. We have some meetings in the Cross Keys cluster. So we're really trying to be pointed to get some more feedback from our families. So that is happening in the background, and then we'll hopefully get all the information and get it to you guys as a data point that we can look at. And March is the hope. It may be later. Again, going to get the information we need hopefully first. Dr. Horton did a SAP quarterly update video in his December meeting, or what's that thing called? Newsletter. So each quarter, I'm going to kind of say, give him a synopsis of what we've been doing so he can get that in just people's pockets. It's a quick and cute video just to kind of keep people abreast of what we're doing. We'll talk a little more about some other ways that hopefully we can do that tonight. Some special guests are here with me. I brought my planning team, so the boundaries and the data and the enrollments and projections, all those things. That team is here to kind of walk through the presentation tonight with us. And then if you see anything, thank you guys for people that look at this ahead of time and say, hey, Sarita, this is wrong, or you missed this, or I do correct it. And the one that goes online is typically the correct version of this, because again, learning as well. Two things that got brought up at the last meeting was board buy-in and how we're doing that. Great question. So some board members come to these meetings, some alternate. Depending on the area. But I'm going to meet with Dr. Horton to figure out what that process looks like and how often we should be updating the board at board meetings. So that is coming. And then a PR firm, because we could do all this work, and if people are not abreast along the way, we can get there and it could be catastrophic. So I kind of got we should get a PR firm to talk through to the community and push this out beyond just DeKalb County School District, because it could affect other people in the county in general. So looking into all those things. All right, so tonight we're going to go pretty quickly into the boundaries. You guys are used to the process now, so I don't have to kind of beat the horse, right? Talk a little bit about learning our boundaries, kind of how we got here, what a boundary is. A lot of people have no clue what boundaries are. So I think it's really good to just ground ourselves in what that is. Talk a little bit about the difference between redistricting and reimagining, and talk a little bit about some opportunities that we have and some challenges that are related to this. And then you guys get to spend some time with maps. And your questions are in there in your Google Drive. So we will look at those. So we have several maps that we're going to look at tonight. All right, so hoping tonight that you just understand our current boundaries and what they are, and then again, that difference between redistricting and reimagining. That's kind of the outcome for tonight. Okay, something to ponder. So there's very few school districts that do not do this. Most of our public school systems use geographic boundaries to assign students to schools, right? Geographics and demographics of our communities change quite often, hence why we do things like census. So if we have a responsibility to review those as well. We should be doing this annually, right? Not as extensive a process. We're doing this extensively because we're looking at the entire district, but we should be looking at boundaries and how demographics change and any tweaks to those really annually. So we don't have to do something so large and encompassing like this. So just think of those parallels, and families have a really, really hard time with that because they're like, I bought this house here because this is the school that, cool, but if that entire block changes and there was only 5 kids on it and now there are 500, we need to shift something, right? And that is a very, very tricky concept to communicate, and it's really, really hard for families who bought that house on that block for that school, right? So just something to ponder as we go through this process. Is this one of you guys? No? Is it me? Sorry, I wasn't following my... document here. And I'm introducing David Yoke. Yay.
Are you going to introduce me?
Hi, this is David.
I'll take the mic as well.
Oh, yes. I keep forgetting about this.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Yoke, manager of the planning department. I deal mostly with forecasting, attendance areas, capacity, all sorts of things to help operations function. So first, I'm going to talk about what's redistricting on a high level. The definition we came up with is a reassignment of addresses from one attendance area to another to satisfy district goals and to follow district policy board AD. So we'll break down in a minute what we mean by district goals and what the policy says. And let me set myself up a little bit here. Sorry about that. So why would we do redistricting? The slide has just some thoughts about why we've done redistricting. Generally, they fall into three buckets, I feel like, where we want to create new attendance areas because we built a new school or a new addition to a school, and we want to put more kids in because we've increased the capacity. Balance enrollment between schools when there are overcrowded schools and under-enrolled schools, and improve conditions for students, such as removing portable classrooms, shortening travel times to school, and so forth. And that includes during construction projects. When a lower enrollment at the school allows us more flexibility to get our projects done within the schools. So we're going to focus on the primary, what the board policy says that governs how we do redistricting. And on the slide, you'll see the full text of the policy, and I've also included a URL there to look at it more in depth. Don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as possible. So the policy established attendance areas for each school, and it lists criteria for the alteration of those attendance areas, which are listed on the slide. So first, proximity, which I take to mean students should be assigned to the nearest school or at least within a reasonable distance. For example, we wouldn't want to redistrict from Stone Mountain to McNair just because it's overcrowded here and not there. Capacity, which is instructional capacity. So this means the capacity that it's not the fire and life safety capacity of the school. That would be very, very high, probably 5,000 for a high school. We're talking about how many students can be taught in the spaces in the building based on the number of classrooms and common areas. And then third is enrollment. So this includes the current enrollment and any expected changes we see from enrollment trends or housing development or the neighborhood cycles. And all three of these criteria interact with each other, so they can't be kind of taken one at a time. They all kind of, interact with each other. So the other criteria, you can read there as well, include safety and traffic patterns, previous redistricting, intact neighborhoods, special programs, conditions of the facility, school feeder pattern, efficient and economical operations. And the last category, other criteria, is give some flexibility for the superintendent to include other criteria as long as that's communicated during the process. And I can answer questions or talk more about each one if there are any questions about that later. The policy also establishes that who gets to remain after redistricting. So if you're rising into the 5th, 8th, or 11th, or 12th grade, you can choose to remain at your school after you've been reassigned to a different school. So a little bit of history. So the past 20 years, this is most of the major redistricting that we've done. And notice on the right are since 2014. Most years until the pandemic, we were redistricting somewhere every year. So in the central area, we redistricted for the new Fernbank Elementary and the new Rockbridge Elementary, and then again to balance the Druid Hills cluster, kind of another redistricting for Fernbank. But really the key takeaway is since 2011 was a big redistricting that touched most areas of the county and looked at least somewhat holistically at where we have capacity, where we need capacity, and where we can consolidate schools and where we may need to add schools. So since 2011, we haven't had a successful, at least, implementation of a district-wide plan. So this is a fun graphic. Takes a little bit of explanation. So this is comparing back to that 2011, the number of students that live in each area. So this is by the student's address, no matter where they attend, and this is K through 12. So you're looking at high school boundaries, and you see the very dark blue up in Chamblee and Cross Keys has increased 2,000 or more students. Then you see down here, Columbia, Miller Grove, down more than 1,500 students that live in that area and go to get any of our DeKalb schools. So all of this change has happened, and we haven't had a holistic adjustment of our attendance areas to match the enrollment change. And I will pass it back.
Oh, I thought you said go back. Sorry. I was forgetting about the mic. You'll probably talk a lot about this map at your tables. It's a little interesting. And then I think the last committee asked, like, well, do we have a comparable map about where kids go to school, right? And my push is going to be, are we going to reimagine for where they want to be or where they live? That's my push to the committee. Doing both is going to be hard. Are we going to reimagine for where kids live or where they want to go to school? Okay, I'll just leave that there. Yeah.
Can we get a map like this for the next 5 years? For the
Projections?
5-year projection?
Yeah, I think David's been writing down some
I know we've
suggestions.
seen one that was
That
kind of
had
a
some-
map, but
yeah.
this is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's taking notes. Yeah.
And then also, is there also the breakdown of the grade bands?
Like a grade band map.
The grade band, so for instance, where it's up 2,000.
Is that high school, middle school, or is that elementary? Yeah, yeah. So I will tell you that elementary is not growing rapidly, but good point.
It depends. We do have
Total.
information broken out however many ways you want, definitely by
Do
grade
you
band.
have data on the average age of the people who live in the various areas?
We-
Can
We
you
have
get
census
that
data
from
for that. yeah.
Census or something like that, like, in the Columbia area, what's the average age of the people that live in that area?
Yeah.
Compared to the people that live in the Druid Hills area?
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of speak to a lot of that real quick, why things are happening in different area is different in different communities. Why there's growth in Chamblee is different and has different factors than why there's shrinking in Columbia. In some cases, it's young families moving in other cases, it's people aging out. So, yes, we have data on all of that, and when we get into the implementation of a lot of this, absolutely a lot of that we'll be able to look at.
And just make sure in your worksheets you add those maps suggestions, because we can pull those and get those to you guys. So just a little, again, something to ponder. So like we talked a little bit about like redistricting that has been happening in DeKalb, and efforts have often been either in response to something that's super localized and quite reactionary, like, oh, we have East Blocks coming, so let's look at what we should do, when it should be the other way around. We should have a process that we're always looking at this, and then as funds become available, we have then done a process to say like, hey, here is a comprehensive process how we looked at this, and this is what we believe as a community those funds should be used for. And that hasn't always happened. It's been very like, oh, it's, Doraville United's on fire. We got to build a school here, and now we have to redistrict around Doraville United. So it's been very localized and quite reactionary, and the hope is that we move away from that and come up with kind of a 5-year process to connect to those funds, which I believe come every 7 years. So we'll hopefully be a little bit ahead of the curve on that. And if we do this often, it becomes normalized. That's the other piece of it, right? So when people say like, well, if you're buying DeKalb, just know it's a possibility if your neighborhood changes that your school might change, right? And hopefully we'll get some really good information around that school choice piece so people don't feel like they have to leave a school to get adequate education. So again, kind of the difference is just about the redistricting versus reimagining. It's kind of this blue piece. So a lot of times things get redistricted, but the programs are not involved in that conversation. As you saw in our program meeting, that has a pretty heavy impact on our schools, our capacities, how many kids are there, why some are overcrowded, why some are underutilized, et cetera, right? So we have to talk about that program review and where those locations are when we talk about any kind of boundary changes. We have to do like real stakeholder and community voice, right? And so I feel like, we did the 3 meetings. That's wonderful. But we're talking about an entire district, right? And so we have to do a little bit more than we've done in 3 meetings. And I think, again, and I say this at the board meetings, I'll say it here again, just because we heard the community doesn't mean that's what we're going to do, right? It needs to be one arm of that information. So there's community voice, there is finances, there's how do you operationalize this. All that has to be connected into the decision making or recommendations. There's often a lot of redistricting around like building new or moving, but never really consolidation. So that's a part of this topic, right? Like if we consolidate something, how do we bring something better and new to an area instead of just taking something away? And then data, right? Triangulating all those kind of things. And we'll be pulling together, especially after we get that survey information, any other maps or data that we bring. So you have several data points to look at before we come up with a recommendation. That's just a little bit of a difference. I should have put on here also, like, just because it has been doesn't mean it's so, right? Like that's another part of reimagining a little bit. Like just because we've had K-5, 6, 8 high school doesn't mean those are the grade bands we have to have, right? If pre-K2 is a grade band we believe is really strong and we need it, and we can again triangulate that data, that's something we could bring up even though that hasn't been what we've been doing. I think it is Hans.
All right. So, hello. Hans Williams. I'm Director of Planning and Capital Improvement Programming. So I've also been involved with redistricting quite a bit over the last 10, 12 years or so. So I'm here to talk about some of our opportunities, challenges, and really kind of speak to what Sarita was just saying about reimagining. So beyond just redistricting, when we talk about redistricting, we're already presupposing districts. Like there's already a framework we're working within. And whereas with a reimagining, it gives us this opportunity to step back and say, well, hang on, how do we actually want to organize ourselves? And the answer may be, okay, the way we're doing it right now, the way we have geographic attendance areas like that, that may be the most efficient, but now is the time for us to take a look at that and say, is that what we want to do? If so, why? Are there ways we can tweak it? So some of the ways we can look at it is, Sarita mentioned, reimagine grade bands in schools. I mean, already we've had examples in the district over the past 10 years of, oh, probably more like 20, of what would now be considered non-traditional grade bands. For example, when Dunwoody Elementary opened, it opened up, I believe, as a K3, and then there was, or it was the 4-5 academy, that's what it was. And then the other schools had pre-K through 3. That's something that we've done, and then we moved to pre-K through 5 for all of those schools once we were able to. Other school districts, Decatur has a similar thing. I think they have a 4-5 academy. That sort of thing can provide efficiencies depending on what it is you're actually looking for out of your school configurations. We can imagine how we create boundaries. So right now we have clusters. We have a middle and a high that have the same attendance area with one exception. And ideally we have what we call one-to-one feeders, which is all the elementaries in an area feed up to that middle, and then that feeds up to the high. But there are inefficiencies there as well, because you can have waves of students where you have overcrowded elementaries and undercrowded high schools all in the same cluster. Or do we just want to go with, you know what, forget the clustering, forget all of that, just your closest proximity school. But then that also has inefficiencies, because if 2,000 students have the same nearest high school, and it can only fit 1,000 students, someone's going to need to go to somewhere else. So how do we figure that out? Other opportunities, school choice options for all. So this is kind of the, well, what if we just didn't have boundaries at all? Everybody could just pick their school. Well, how does that work? I mean, it sounds like chaos, but at the same time, there are places that are able to do this. There are ways of developing some sort of strategy, some sort of like first choice pick, or whatever the case is, where, you know, there aren't set attendance areas. Students really can either pick or apply for or have some opportunity to go to almost any other school in the district. But obviously there's lots of challenges there. Area boundaries. So this is where, rather than like, okay, your attendance area is just this attendance area like Stone Mountain Elementary, it's like, okay, it's a bigger area that encompasses 3 different elementaries, and each one has its own thing going on. And you need to go to one of these 3, you can't go everywhere, but within this area, you can kind of pick and choose. Or something in between all of that. So we have this big opportunity right now to reimagine. And as I said, that doesn't mean we have to change the way things work. It means now is the time, if we're going to, now's the time to think about that. And then challenges. We have, and this is kind of that map that David showed before, was showing this. We have 10,000 fewer students now than we did at our peak, which is roughly 2015, 2016. But we have more or less the same number of schools. If we were at our peak today, we would still have more seats than we need. So even if we were at our peak, we still have lots of schools and lots of seats for the number of students that we have. And we're 10,000 less than that. So last school year, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 open seats. That's, you know, across elementary, middle, and high, yes, but how many schools does that equal? Don't know. 10 elementary, 5 middle, 10,000 elementary open, 5,000 middle, 5,000 high. And I mean, those are rough, but no matter how you figure it, there's challenges there. Things need to be figured out, reimagined, rebalanced, whatever the case is. We have clusters of overcrowded schools and clusters of underutilized schools. Things aren't balanced across the district. Our projections are not trending up for younger grades, and that will eventually become middle and high. Basically, birth rates in DeKalb County, I mean, nationwide, but in DeKalb County are going down. Our kindergarten enrollment rate has been going down, and these are the kids that for the next 12 years are going to be going through the DeKalb County school system. No matter how you look at it, the projections for this district are not up. So that's another challenge we have to look at. Everything I just discussed is where we are today, but moving forward, the trend is not up, it's down, or at least level. And then, as David mentioned, we haven't done a holistic review of our boundaries or just the way that we arrange students in our schools in well over a decade. So now's the time for that. And because of that, we have inefficient attendance areas that, you know, there are some of our schools that haven't been redistricted in some people's lifetimes. I think David found one that hadn't been redistricted since the 60s, or at least we couldn't find evidence of it. That's very rare, but there's a lot of historic momentum, I guess I'll say, or historic inertia, that's the right word, for a lot of our attendance areas. And so that's, honestly, I kind of see that as almost an opportunity, because now is the time when we're looking at the entire district to help try and overcome that inertia, to say, no, it's not one area that's being redistricted, it's everybody. And so regardless of how stable you've been, we need to look at everybody and make changes that make sense for the entire district. So speaking to the entire district, these are just some maps that we put together looking at the distribution of students, both as a whole, and you can see the clustering of students in the district. It's kind of neat to see that heat map. But also some of the things that were asked even here. So median age of total population. This is census data by block group, I believe. Percent of population whose income in the past 12 months is below the poverty level. How that's spread out or clustered, depending on how you look at it. Predominant race, I believe this is by, is this student or is this census as well? Census. Okay, so this is all, these are all census data. So this is by census tract. Predominant race by census tract. And then percent of population. So we went with Spanish because that was the easiest data to get at the time. But realistically, I want to redo this map because we actually have two clusters of families whose home language is not English. So this shows the clustering we see of Spanish, but there's another non-Spanish, non-English cluster around Clarkston, refugee resettlement, that sort of thing. So just kind of...
Is that multiple languages in Clarkston?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah, multiple.
Yeah, it's at one time, I think we're probably still in the right range. Georgia was, I think, the 7th largest refugee resettlement in the district. Of that, like 80% settle in the Clarkston area, at least initially.
We used to call church world service and say, what country's coming next so we could get ready.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
Yep, and so it's still the case that there's a large cluster of non-English speaking families in that area and elsewhere in the district. And it's just useful, this gets back to the demographics question. These are the types of things we need to keep in mind when we're answering these questions, because what we're seeing here now is not how it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, however long ago. So these are the types of things that change, that require us to, as Sarita said, look at, re-examine this every year so we're not caught off guard. So, were you doing current maps?
Yeah.
I'll hand it back to Sarita to kind of go over some of our current maps.
So we printed a lot of maps because they're really hard to look, like mine's is like as big as me in my office. They're just really hard to look at small, but there are some on the back table that are printed pretty large. I've kind of directed you guys to that planning website a lot for all of our maps. So there is this very, if your eyes are like mine, confusing active school maps because you have to follow lines. And so we printed this one pretty large. So the blue is your high school, and then there's some dotted lines for your middle school, and then the color ones are elementary school boundaries. So it's a lot going on. But David and Hans developed elementary, middle, and high school separate maps. So those are there. We also, am I getting ahead of myself? I also made a feeder list. So this is one of the conversation pieces. Families really, really like stability and where their kid goes to elementary, middle, high school. That's a feeder pattern, right? There is a belief that we do one-to-one feeders here in DeKalb. As per this list, that is not true. Again, when it comes to kind of balancing, if you have a cluster where that elementary school is pretty stable, but then the middle school gets a little overcrowded, that middle school then gets split into 2 high school feeders. And even in the elementary level, some of those are split into middle school feeders. So this is just a snapshot of it, but the physical paper is on your table to look at as well. I think we also printed that heat map that Hans just went over. So it's just it took me a while during the summer just to even understand our maps and where kids went to school and what that looked like. And I think the maps give a better view of those split feeders. So you'll see an elementary, and then you'll see in that the next map for middle, it's like, wait, a part of that elementary is gone. Oh, they're going to a different school. Got it. Right. And so that's a document to help you, but the visual, I think, just speaks to it better. There are some community members that really love split feeders. Some really love going to the school next to their house. That's something we're going to have to grapple with in this community. Like, are we going to continue this process of splitting and balancing, or are we really going to try to get some stability from elementary, middle to high school? Okay.
Can I talk about that?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So this was my attempt at highlighting where those split feeders are on a map. So the only split feeder to the north of us is Doraville United, that splits between Sequoia Middle and Peachtree Middle. That was implemented in 2020 by Ramona Tyson in lieu of a future plan. So that's the most recently implemented as well. The clustering down here is mostly in between MLK and other districts, other MLK and Miller Grove and adjacent clusters, which are the two newest high schools. So when they were built in the early 2000s, they basically just took parts of other places and they didn't make everybody one-to-one, particularly because of the farther distance, because it's a lot more rural and spread out down there. It's a bit harder to implement, because if you're not going to your closest school may be like 10 miles away. So if there's any other questions about this, I can explain more, but it was just kind of highlighting the geographic distribution of those split feeders. So the pink is showing, so this area here, Murphy-Candler, is on your list as going to MLK. This pink area is the part that actually goes to Lithonia.
And the purpose for the split feeders is strictly capacity?
I would say also proximity, because you want to, if this area is a lot farther from MLK than Lithonia, so it had to do with the capacity when whatever school opened or whenever we were looking at it.
Meaning that the elementary cluster is so far flung that there's one part of it that's closer to another.
Right, in the extreme.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out too that the reality is that a lot of these split feeders didn't all happen at the same time. I mean, David's right that I think the majority of these were when Stevenson opened and when MLK before that opened in the early 2000s. But not all of that is from these. There's also been a few new elementary schools in that time that opened. And one of the consistent themes we see when we look back at the record of that is, yes, absolutely, geography was a part of it, but I mean, there's no other way to put it, politics was as well. That when schools opened, redistricting is hard. It's part of the reason why most of the theme schools in the district are in that area, because when new elementary schools opened, that was a way of not having to fully redistrict. It's also why some of the attendance areas, especially around like Flat Rock Elementary and a few others, if you look at it, it's obvious that it was not a geographic decision that went, or not wholly geographic, I should say, that went into the attendance area of Flat Rock Elementary. But at the same time, as you know, when I look at it personally, I say, how, this looks really weird. How can this be, this attendance area be? It's also been successful for 15 plus years now, or probably going on 20 years. It's been that way for a very long time. So it's
2007. Yeah.
And when you say successful,
I mean, people haven't risen up in arms saying, why am I driving all this way to go from up by Miller Grove High School all the way down south to where Flat Rock Elementary is, that's the attendance area curves all the way up like that. That whatever the inefficiencies or downsides that people may see in these split feeders, these neighborhoods are not clamoring to fix this right now.
but is it also reflected in the performance of the schools or the outcomes?
I am using the word successful in a different way, so you're right. I should be using a different word. I am not going to defend that because I don't know. The answer is I don't know. And that's part of what we're trying to be here. I was simply pointing out the fact that geography isn't the only reason that went into this. Very obviously, there were political decisions as well. And but we as a district have this to look at when we look at attendance areas. And as Sarita was saying, do we want to keep one-to-ones? And if so, what does that mean for these areas? Do we not want to keep one-to-one? And what does that mean for everywhere that isn't these attendance areas? That's the kind of things we need to be looking at.
We also put in a lot of high school and middle schools without adding elementaries when we did that move down there. So you already had all the elementary zones in place, and then you dropped high schools and middles in the middle of it.
Yeah, there was some of that, and I don't know if it was.
Like Southwest and Cedar Grove and Columbia and Towers, and Lithonia, and that was it. And then we dropped more high schools down there, but we didn't build a whole bunch of elementary feeders to go with those. High schools.
Right, to match the
So they
geography.
had to start splitting up stuff.
I don't know if it was said, but split feeders are very common. When I looked at surrounding districts, they all had some areas that split feed because it's just really hard and expensive to try and do one-to-one, and you end up with people saying, that's my closest school. Why isn't that my school? And it's like, oh, well, you're in this feeder pattern. There's a lot of reasons to split.
With Flat Rock having I'm going to assume, having the largest attendance boundaries of an elementary school on that side of town, is it that the solution will be a split scenario if that is reimagined for those attendance boundaries for that particular school?
I don't know. We'd have to, the answer to that question depends on how holistic we look at all of the attendance areas. If you're looking at it just as Flat Rock and surrounding schools, it becomes a lot harder. That's a part of the reason why there haven't been too many attempts, or at least not a successful attempt, to change the attendance area until now. But the more holistic you can get with reimagining elementary attendance areas, the easier it is to make it an area that makes more intuitive sense. And I don't mean to pick on Flat Rock like it's absolutely the worst. It's just the one that stands out the most to me as, oh, this doesn't make intuitive sense.
It's
And that-
already a split feed too, so it's not
Yeah.
that way because of one-to-one,
Gotcha.
despite it.
But that's what I meant by we have to grapple with that first question. So are we really pushing for consistency and continuity for families when I believe a third of our families change every year in the district?
Oh, yeah, so in looking at the data, now this includes your kindergarten coming in and your 12 going
Going
out.
out.
But when you look just from one year to the next, 1/3 of the students who are in our schools today won't be here next year. And next year, 1/3 of the students that are here weren't here this year.
We have a large transient population in DeKalb County
2/3
School
are consistent
District.
from year to year, but it's a different 2/3 every year, so.
Okay, so
is that because-
2/3 are consistent, and so in aggregate, 1/3 are either going out or coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
And that, when you say going out or coming in, you mean like they're moving out of Georgia or they're moving out of DeKalb? Or you mean like they're going to private schools?
All
All of that.
Some of them are, 12th graders are graduating, that's part of the
yeah.
third. Kindergartners are coming in for the first time, or
Yeah.
pre-K, that's part of the third. Some are moving away, some are moving in, some are going to private school, some are coming from private school.
Yeah.
Any reason why a student
Lots
may
of
be,
movement.
Lots of movement.
yeah, all right.
But I say that to say community members often say, well, I want my kid to go with school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade with their friends, right? And so the question then becomes if one-to-one is important to us as a committee, like that map is going to look drastically different, right? If split is if attending school that is within close proximity is important, and that becomes, and we'll talk about this in a minute, our guiding principle, that map is also going to look different, right? And so we will come up with the criteria, if you will, and then they'll pump out the maps for us to look at and examine. So that's that first question you guys are going to think through.
To come up with a guiding principle.
Principles, yes. That's the first map, or the first question you guys are going to think through. What are some advantages or disadvantages of that one-to-one versus split, right? Because there are many on both sides. I love my kid. I'd love to buy a house and say, I know my kid is going to this school, this school, this school. I don't have to think about it, right? Like that is phenomenal. But what challenges does that pose on our end, and vice versa?
So a lot of this is driven by the fact that we've got sort of a 3-stage educational experience, right? At elementary, middle, and high school. Are there any models, and I don't think there are in DeKalb, but elsewhere in the state or legal under the state or whatever, where you start to roll that up? You know, I mean, like famously, Druid Hills High School was a K through high school when it was originally.
Like K-12.
So are there any models where, you know, there are schools that go further than the elementary into, I know that we used to have elementary and high school, and so you'd go what, K through 8?
Seven.
Okay, that's right, because in Roswell, I was a sub-freshman.
Were you a sub-freshman? Were you a subby?
And so are those available options?
Everything is on. We can look at all kind of maps, right? Like we
In
can.
the state in terms of that type of thing?
No.
The
Okay.
state has no prohibitions that they would be unwilling to waive. DeKalb can ask for any waiver they want, and the state will give.
All right, so there is.
We can reimagine all kinds
There
of
would be a
grade bands.
school that your kids start in kindergarten, and then somehow the school is organized where they're high school students.
It's possible. It is possible. The second thing I want you guys to discuss and think about at your table is this no boundaries, right? Like if everybody could just go into a lottery and choose a school, like how would that work? What would that look like? I see the chaotic look faces. It would be crazy. However,
Guys that have to pull all those lottery people in.
yeah, my team would not be very happy, and they would probably all quit. But you know, something to think about. But and I pose the question because there could be things that you guys think about that can be implemented, even if that isn't the route we go, right? So I think pushing of the question is like, if that was an option, maybe something out of that conversation gets now implemented into how we do school choice, right? So maybe that's not the option, but just think through kind of some pros and cons, how that will work. A big question is, this isn't a question of if there's going to be change, it's how we do it, right? We're going to have to change some things. How do we bring families along this journey? That's again where that PR piece came out of the last meeting, and bring them along the journey in a way that feels authentic. If we have 93,000 students, that means we have 150,000 parents, right? That's a lot of people to bring along the journey. What should that look like? I'll probably spend a good amount of the time in the spring trying to map that out for next year as we go through this and we start to really get a little deeper into some actual preliminary kind of recommendations, so we can start shopping stuff along the way, so we're just not hitting people all at once with, hey, by the way, here's a 150-page document on how we're going to reimagine the CAD. And then just think about those opportunities on slide 24. So again, all this is in your Google Drive, and so it's work time, and we'll be coming around, and our expert friends are here coming around, and maps are printed back there, and then we'll come back. Yes?
I mean, I was looking at that map, and one of the things on that map of where the facilities are these special schools that are like theme schools.
The active map has
magnet
those.
schools and charter schools.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's part of the conversation tonight as well, because they're right in the middle of a feeder cluster.
They are.
And I think those impact some of the decision-making about how we decide where people go, because
Absolutely. So every school is on the active map. The elementary, middle, and high school are neighborhood schools, okay? So your Kittredges and Wadsworth, they are not on those schools, on that map. The active map has every school, charter, magnet, everything is on that active map. That's why we printed it pretty large too. So there's symbols that kind of help you identify where those are.
Could we see a large map that shows all the properties the district owns?
We do have that. I did not print it. I didn't print that one.
It's on the website.
It's on the
Because there are
website.
things like the Druid Hills Driver's Ed
Facility.
When Hightower gets redone, where are the kids gonna go? Potentially use that
Yeah.
as.
Or as we reimagine, are there spaces that we own that we could share?
No, the Doraville Driver's Ed facility.
Yeah.
It's literally down the street from Hightower.
I was making sure there wasn't the Druid Hills.
Yeah, you just said Druid Hills.
You said Drew Hills. That's okay. They got you. They knew what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, time to work. We'll come around. Make sure you point somebody to jot down in that Google Drive, por favor. You guys want to come? Okay. Can we please, because my lord. My lord. It is rough out there. We can migrate.
What does that mean?
right, so a few things before we share out, and I talked to a few tables a little bit about this. When we come together in February, we're at a meeting of the whole at AIC with everybody. We are going to go over a little bit of an exercise about developing guiding principles, which every recommendation we make will be against the guiding principles that we develop together. So we'll do a little practice. You guys will have a chance to kind of shop around some divisions. So Kayla and I are working pretty hard to get answers to all your questions that you guys have had over the last 3 months, including the ones from tonight. So you'll come armed with the answers from various people in the district, but then they'll also be there. So we'll have a little time to meet with some folks that are a part of the decision making and have really the power, because I have none. So you'll get to meet with them. And then we'll go into a little exercise about how to develop a guiding principle, because the next 3 months after that is all we're going to be doing. And we're going to spend that much time, because when I say every recommendation, if you guys bring me a recommendation that does not hit that guiding principle, is not a part of the SAP vision, I'm going to say, sorry, try again. We're not bringing that to the board, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time developing what those are, so we can then start implementing how to use that in the fall. Oh, that's just some glossary stuff. Cool. All right. So maps, boundaries, redistricting, reimagining. What you guys got? Who's going first? Come on, Tucker.
All right, well, since I'm sitting here,
You have to stand up for us, please.
okay. So, the first question was, what advantages and disadvantages of one-to-one cluster feeder school patterns, and 2 split feeders? So the advantages, I guess, of the one-to-one are stronger academic communities and stability, strengthening extracurricular communities, sports and band identities are reinforced. Disadvantages is, notwithstanding the stability, there's still socioeconomic stratification within the schools. We saw split feeder advantages as better geographic proximity, especially for younger children, but sometimes that it divides neighborhoods. Under imagining a district with no boundaries, what are the possibilities? What are the challenges? How would it work? A plus, obviously, is maximum potential for school child alignment. Minus is great potential equity issues related to transportation and parental capacity. There would be a significant resource burden on the school system to try to transport all of those kids to where they wanted to go. It won't work unless there is a perception of uniform, high-quality instruction, because otherwise kids would simply be shopping for, quote, the cool school. If we were going to do this, we talked a lot about having to limit the range of choice and replicate the same spectrum in multiple areas of the county, but that the quality of instruction would still need to be perceived as uniform if you're going to achieve that.
Sorry, I should have told you that. Like top 2 things. Sorry. I didn't mean. You did your homework. I appreciate it.
Do you want me to start?
2 kind of big ideas.
How do we
Give me one more.
families and reimagining the process? Well, there was intensify, outreach, and survey, but there also was the notion of developing more effective product development tools to ensure the response that is indicated, is both preference and performance. So, approach it more like a product and not like a, political.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Very well. Very well. You guys did a good job.
Hard to follow those people.
1 or 2.
But I'm not even sure we have 1. That's what I'm worried about. Okay, so we definitely talked about the advantages around one-to-one is kind of this, like, again, it's like known. I think the connection to property values. I bought this house here, therefore my kid will go there, there, and there. And we talked about a disadvantage of the possibility of it being inefficient, right? That maybe there are schools not being utilized to the best of their ability. I don't know, did we think that split feeders were more efficient? We didn't really talk about split feeders as much. What do you all think?
Yeah, they have the potential to be more efficient because
you can adjust the
Geographic.
boundaries according to capacity. Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right. So there's that on that.
yeah,
Imagining
that's a
a
lot.
district with no boundaries, basically, everyone was like, logistically, it couldn't happen. We didn't really go beyond that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and I was worried, I personally was like worried about equity, if it's just like all wide open, like who gets to make choices, who has the privilege to make choices and who doesn't.
For sure.
And then we did talk about, could there be like a mini no boundaries, like within a cluster, could there be no boundaries? So what would that look like? And then for the third question about how to support families in the reimagining process, we talked about like how I think it needs to be, we think it needs to be local, like you're very nice people, but like I think most of our families are not going to show up to a meeting like that. But if you had someone that they knew, like for our school, Stephanie and I, or someone in the PTA,
Like a rep.
that could be kind of like disciples, so to speak. I
Yeah.
think that would be more useful. And then, of course, again, thinking about our school, it has to be multilingual. Everything that you do has to be multilingual. I think it needs to be words and pictures because, you know, maybe some infographics or something, because some people are not going to read, like you said, a 150-page document is just not going to get read by our community.
2-page document.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna think about this like PTA rep idea. I think that's,
Yours.
ooh, SAP influencers. Some of this doesn't have to wait until the recommendation, you know, we're gonna. I like.
Okay, so we did a lot of discussion, a lot of brainstorming, looking at maps and everything. A lot of our discussions reflected a lot of your ideas. So rather than rehash everything, essentially the the advantages of like a one-to-one cluster is familiarity, continuity, geographically you're all located. It's kind of like, again, like we all talked about, I bought this house here, we're gonna go here, we've got this idea. Pretty easy and straightforward. The disadvantage of that is your lack of diversity and inclusion, your lack of advertising, open STEM programs or other things like that, because it's just more localized in that area. There may be language barriers, things like that. So again, there's just that kind of lack of diversity and inclusion. When it came to split feeders, again, for an advantage, we saw continuity and geography. One disadvantage we did talk about was maybe a longer day for those children that are traveling, that are forced to split off. They have to get up earlier and they have to stay later. Not stay later, but by the time they get home, it's much later. So there is that longer day and that disadvantage for those children and parents who have those experiences. When it comes to the other items, we really talked so much about different schools and things like that, so we don't have a lot of.
No worries. You guys were
things to
deep in
share
the
on
maps. I
But
saw you,
y'all-
you know.
Y'all had some good information. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And I did kind of also explain, you know, after we develop these guiding principles, Hans, David, and I will probably spend a considerable amount of time in the summer pumping out stuff for you guys to look at. Hey, you guys decided a guiding principle is closest proximity to school. Here's a map that looks at closest proximity to school. You decided that clusters were, you know, one-to-one clusters. Here's a map what, you know, one-to-one clusters looks like. We decided that we should cluster magnet programs throughout the district. Here's a map of what, so we'll be, so again, I like the guiding principle is going to be really, really, really critical, because once we develop them, we're going to start pumping out ideas on what that looks like. And so I'll probably allow each committee, each North, Central, South, and Southeast and Southwest to keep somewhat separate guiding principles, because then we could pump out more ideas for everybody to look at. But when we come back in the fall, we'll kind of have a pretty big haul of ideas based on those guiding principles. So that'll be really, really critical that we're pretty solid in how we develop those, which is why we're going to practice all together on February 26th. So you got a little time before you see us again, because we condensed everybody's February meeting into that last one in February. Questions? You guys are rock stars. Thank you so much. We're going to take all your ideas. Oh yeah, we have an exit ticket, don't I? You know, of course I do. Please, whoever there's somebody added X map ideas. Please put it in your document so I can remember to add them to our questions so they actually become a thing. Thank you, thank you. And thanks for my amazing planning team people. They are so great and smart. Couldn't do it without them. You guys are the best. I'm just a face. What you say, Smart? I wasn't there today. The heat don't work? You cold?
It's pretty cold there.
Is it words or is it just numbers?